The camera swept across the studio, capturing the polished glass desk, bright lights, and a buzzing audience that could barely contain their anticipation. It was a special nationally televised town hall titled Integrity in Leadership, featuring Senator J.D. Vance and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The atmosphere was electric, as viewers across the country tuned in, expecting policy discussions and maybe a few verbal jabs. What they got instead was something far more explosive. J.D. Vance sat on one side of the stage. Impeccably dressed, his expression cool and confident, he leaned back slightly, giving off the air of someone who had mastered the art of political performance. A practiced smile tugged at his lips as he adjusted his microphone, nodding along with the opening remarks of the moderators. On the opposite end sat Jasmine Crockett, composed, direct, and unmistakably prepared. Her posture was straight, and in her lap rested a thick, worn folder with color-coded tabs poking out the sides. She hadn't said much yet, but the intensity in her eyes spoke volumes. The moderators launched into the debate with familiar questions, ones about campaign finance reform, public trust, and the need for political transparency. Vance handled them with the ease of someone used to dancing around the truth. When asked about his financial dealings, he smirked slightly and delivered a smooth answer about being proud of supporting innovative entrepreneurship and bringing real business experience to Washington. The audience responded with polite applause, but Crockett's expression didn't change. She waited. Then came the question about the ethics of public-private entanglements in politics. Vance, visibly more animated now, used it as a platform to tout his common-sense conservatism and warn against weaponizing oversight. He gestured broadly, accusing unnamed opponents of focusing on drama instead of results. That's when Crockett shifted in her seat and calmly placed the folder on the desk before her. Since you brought up oversight, she said, her voice steady but sharp, I think now's a good time to share something with the American people. The moderators blinked, momentarily unsure if this was planned. The room went still. Crockett flipped open the folder, revealing several sheets of paper with highlighted sections. The camera zoomed in. These aren't just political talking points, Senator. These are financial records, your records, and they show a pattern that the public deserves to understand. Gasps rippled through the audience. J.D. Vance's jaw visibly tightened, his eyes darting toward the folder, then the moderators, then back to Crockett. One of the hosts hesitated, touching their earpiece as producers chattered nervously in the control room. The feed stayed live. Vance opened his mouth to object, but Crockett raised a hand calmly and continued. You say you're for transparency. Let's test that, shall we? Crockett stood up slowly, drawing the audience's full attention as she pulled a few sheets from her folder and held them up for the cameras to see. Her voice was clear and firm, commanding the room without shouting. These documents come directly from public records and whistleblower reports cross-checked by investigative journalists. They show that Senator J.D. Vance has been using Political Action Committee funds to quietly invest in companies where he holds personal financial stakes. In short, he's been profiting off of your donations while pretending to be your champion. There was a stunned silence, the kind that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. Then, a low murmur began to spread through the crowd, followed by audible gasps. Vance blinked rapidly, his confident facade beginning to crack. He leaned forward and tried to cut in, raising his voice. That's a complete mischaracterization, but Crockett wasn't finished. She pulled up another page and held it higher. Here's the wire transfer. March 14th. Vance's PAC sent $150,000 to a consulting firm, which then funneled funds into a biotech company where Vance sits on the advisory board. That company benefited from legislation he co-sponsored just weeks later. This isn't just unethical, it may be illegal. The moderators, who had tried to remain neutral, now appeared visibly shaken. One of them cleared their throat. Senator Vance, do you deny these transactions took place? Vance straightened in his chair, his face flushing red. My team is looking into these allegations. This is the first time I'm hearing of these specifics. Clearly, this is a political stunt. No, Crockett cut in, her tone even sharper now. What's political is selling out opioid victims in Ohio while accepting campaign donations from pharmaceutical lobbyists. What's political is hiding behind populist language while quietly enriching yourself behind closed doors. The only stunt happening here is your attempt to dodge accountability. The tension in the room had risen to a boil. The audience was no longer murmuring, they were fully engaged, hanging on every word. Producers in the control booth argued heatedly over the feed, unsure if they should cut to commercial or let it ride, but they didn't dare break away. The truth was unfolding in real time, and social media was already lighting up with hashtags. Hashtag Crockett'svins, hashtag PACScam, hashtag expose Vance. Vance tried once more to regain control of the narrative. This is a smear job done by someone who doesn't understand how investments work. Oh, I understand how corruption works, Crockett shot back. You can call it whatever you like, but I call it betrayal. You promised to fight for the people of Ohio. What you delivered was a golden parachute for yourself. She looked directly into the camera now. If integrity still matters in this country, then the people watching at home need to demand better. Because tonight, we saw what lies behind J.D. Vance's carefully crafted image. And it's not leadership, it's greed. J.D. Vance shifted in his seat, his palms slick with sweat as he tried to maintain composure under the blinding lights and unforgiving camera lenses. The crowd wasn't responding to his usual charm. His attempts to brush off the accusations were falling flat, and his words, once confident and rehearsed, now stumbled out with noticeable hesitation. These numbers are taken out of context, he said, voice slightly cracking, and my team will clarify everything. But the moderators didn't let him off that easily. One leaned forward, papers in hand. Senator, we've independently verified that these accounts are tied to entities you have a controlling interest in. Can you confirm or deny that you benefited financially from legislation you helped pass? Vance opened his mouth, paused, then closed it again. He adjusted his tie, took a breath, and tried to pivot. Look, I've always said I support innovation and job growth. What's being misrepresented here? Answer the question, Senator. Crockett said coldly from across the stage. Yes or no? Did you profit while publicly claiming to fight for people you were actively exploiting? The silence was deafening. He didn't answer. The cameras caught the beads of sweat forming on his forehead, the twitch in his jaw, the growing redness in his ears. The audience, once respectful and quiet, now reacted audibly. A low wave of disbelief swept through the crowd. Some even booed. On Twitter, clips of his silence began going viral in real time. TikTok had already turned Crockett's question, yes or no, into a meme within minutes. Backstage, Vance's communications team was spiraling. Aides barked into phones, texting media allies to prepare damage control. One assistant was heard whispering to a producer, "We need to wrap this up. He's losing it out there." But the producers shook their heads. Ratings were skyrocketing. The nation was watching a political mask melt on live television, and they weren't about to look away. Meanwhile, Crockett sat calmly, hands folded, eyes locked on Vance. She didn't need to speak anymore. His panic said it all. Every attempt he made to recover only dug the hole deeper. I've always acted within the law, he insisted, but the tone was defensive now, laced with desperation. This is a coordinated attack fabricated by my opponents. One moderator, clearly trying to salvage the structure of the debate, asked, Senator, will you make your full financial records public to clear this up? Vance hesitated. The pause stretched too long. We'll consider it, he finally said. But the damage had been done. No one believed him. Journalists in the studio were already drafting headlines. Legal experts on the network's split-screen analysis began pointing out the red flags. Conflict of interest, misuse of PAC funds, possible SEC violations. He looked over at Crockett again, but this time there was no fire in his eyes, only fear. She gave him a look that was part victory, part disappointment. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't ranted. She'd just told the truth, backed by receipts. And J.D. Vance, had nothing to stand on. The sun rose the next morning over a political landscape forever changed. Every major cable news channel led with the same breaking headline: Crockett versus Vance. The night everything changed. Cable segments replayed the debate in slow motion, zooming in on J.D. Vance's frozen expression as Jasmine Crockett revealed document after document. News anchors called it the most devastating live political takedown in recent memory. On social media, millions had already clipped the moment she asked, yes or no, into short, shareable videos that spread like wildfire across platforms. Hashtag Vance Exposed trended #1 in the U.S. for over 18 hours. Even political rivals who had once kept their distance were forced to weigh in. J.D. Vance, once viewed as a rising star with populist charisma and venture capital polish, was now barricaded in political damage control. His morning schedule, once filled with interviews and strategy meetings, was quickly scrubbed. Statements from his office shifted in tone from initial deflection to vague promises of transparency. His press secretary, clearly overwhelmed, offered a brief, awkward statement to the media outside his D.C. office. Senator Vance is reviewing the allegations and will address the public in due time. Reporters immediately began to dig deeper, unearthing older interviews, cross-referencing public filings, and uncovering even more financial entanglements. What had started as a spark from Crockett's folder ignited a media firestorm that no one could put out. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett emerged as a political force in full bloom. News programs invited her onto prime-time segments where she sat with unwavering confidence, explaining how months of quiet investigation, independent research, and help from whistleblowers had led her to that moment on stage. This wasn't about scoring political points, she said calmly during an interview with MSNBC. It was about accountability. I couldn't watch the people of Ohio or anywhere be lied to while power protected itself. Donations poured into her campaign website faster than it could handle. Her staff reported record-breaking volunteer sign-ups within 24 hours. Civic groups began requesting her to speak at their events. Even some disillusioned moderate voters said they saw in her a rare kind of politician, fearless, prepared, and honest. In Washington, murmurs grew louder. Members of the Senate Ethics Committee called for an emergency session. Several key Democrats and even a few Republicans issued statements expressing grave concern over the financial irregularities Crockett had exposed. A formal investigation was launched that same week, with subpoenas reportedly on the table. Political strategists speculated whether Vance could survive even one more news cycle without resigning or being forced into censure. Some whispered about possible criminal referrals, depending on how deep the money trail went. And then there was the cultural shift, the symbolic resonance. College campuses screened the debate as an example of truth confronting power. Editorial boards that had previously stayed neutral praised Crockett for her composure and courage. Viral street art began popping up in major cities, showing Crockett holding a stack of documents. Captioned simply, "The Receipt Keeper." She had gone from respected legislator to national figure almost overnight, not by grandstanding, but by out-researching, out-preparing, and outlasting a man who underestimated her. J.D. Vance, once considered unshakable, had been shaken to his core. His silence during that key moment, the long pause, the shift in his eyes would play on loop for years to come in media schools and political documentaries. And Jasmine Crockett, she didn't just win a debate, she redefined the battlefield.